Hi everyone and welcome. It is Wednesday and that means it is time for some Mini Mayhem. I hope you are doing well, and if you're in the chat, feel free to ask any questions you might have. Just be sure you type in caps question, and then after that type in your question. It makes it a lot easier for me to see what's going on in there. I am super excited for today. We have sort of a Wizards of the Coast theme going on, and it's one of those deals where we're going to be looking at some Magic the Gathering products and then switching over to something I've very much been looking forward to doing with you all, and that is a mini paint along. Here on Mini Mayhem, I'm hoping to do a few more of these as we go along, and you too will be able to paint a miniature with me for your lunch break or if you have some time on your hands type of situation. I'm going to pull the thing I always pull. If you are new to the channel, welcome. Don't forget, if you want to keep up with what we are doing here on the YouTube channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and you can also ring the notification bell and it'll let you know when we're doing live streams like this one or when we have video on demand uploaded for you to enjoy. So that all being said, I'm going to start off first with the products that I want to share with you all from Magic the Gathering. Let's take care of the first announcement, because this one I literally don't have on hand because not possible. So I'm just going to flip over to here, and this is the first product I want to bring to your attention. We have it available for pre-order now. This is the Chandra full-size foam figure, okay? So I know it's not exactly a miniature. If we're calling this a miniature, then this qualifies me as a miniature, because this is actually, when it isn't full height, is at full height. It's taller than I am, so it stands at 5 foot 6 inches tall. Right now, the only thing I have of this, I don't have photos of it. The only thing I have of it right now is this render that we have of Chandra. And it's one of those things where it is a special collector's item. However, it's available for pre-order. So if this is something that appeals to you, if you have one of those killer game rooms where you love to decorate it and put some cool things up, you could consider getting this lovely, lovely foam figure for your own collection. It is something where please reach out to your local game store. We always encourage you to shop local first if you can. If you cannot, then we encourage you to check things out online. And I do have links in the description down below for you so that you can hunt and find all this information as well. But she is definitely a very dynamic and cool it's like, I'm going to call it a statue, but it's a figure. Again, great for your collection. So that's really most of the information that I have about Chandra right now. As more gets revealed and we get more photos in, that's definitely something. Keep an eye on our socials. And again, all of our socials are in the description below. So if you haven't started following us yet on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, make sure you do that. And then when there are big announcements like this one or updates on products like this, you will be in the loop and know what's going on. So there is that. And hello, Leonardo. Good to see you joining us. I just noticed your name in the chat over there. By the way, my spread has kind of changed a little bit for the miniature painting today. So if you see me looking all over the place, it's because one screen got shifted over here, one screen got shifted over here, and then I have like the cameras in different positions. So bear with me if I've kind of gone into looking like a crazy bird looking for my spot. But so that is the foam figure I wanted to bring to your attention. Really such a neat accent for game rooms or stores, even if you want to do that for your own store. Now, what do you say we flip over to the wonderful, these, I can't wait to show you because these are absolutely adorable. Right out of the gate, I'm going to say these are adorable. I wanted to share with you the Kid Robot Phunny for the Magic the Gathering line. And I have 4 of them. Okay, so we have 4 of these. I keep calling them funnies, but then that reminds me of comic books. So these funny plushies, I guess is the best way to describe it. Keep in mind, these are all the same price, so $11.99 US dollars. Again, available for pre-order with a release date of October 2020. I don't have an exact date for you because sometimes things start shifting around. Keep in mind, delivery still kind of gets a little wonky every so often, so if you notice that sometimes our release dates have to change, oftentimes it's because it's a matter of getting what we need to where we need to get it and then out to where it needs to go. So that's another little factor just to keep in mind there. And let's see, what do I want to start with today? I think today I am going to pull out... Now, the funny thing about these names is I always feel like I'm talking like someone from a different movie or like a different show. So this one always reminds me of Fifth Element. But this is Nico Bolas. I always want to go Nico Bolas multipass. That's just how my brain works. But let's start off with this cutie. So as you can see, they are a decent size. Once we get the autofocus to focus. They're a decent size. They are about 8 inches. They are an exception to the rule because of the horns. But this is Nico Bolas. And there are some fantastic details that are included in each of these plushies. Okay, first of all, you can see this fantastic texture of the fabric that's being used to make these. They are extremely soft. They are extremely touchable. And they have a nice, this is what I like when plushies are done well. I have a sewing background, so I'm gonna geek out over this. But you can see there is this fantastic fill. They are filled firmly, which is great. All right, so you're not gonna run into things like it's sinking or falling apart type of situation. And you have the ears, which have been finished off. And this is more of a felt-like fabric. Same thing. You have this great stitching going on embroidery-wise around the eyes, the mouth. And it's a bunch of different fabrics, but they're all well put together. And you can see these little extra details. The wings, same thing. Felt like the ears. And the tail with a little ring around it. Look at that. How adorable is that? And I have left the tag on so you can see what this will look like. Whoop, just hit the mic. So you can see what it looks like when you get it. I did cut off a little hanging thing that they have up there for store use. But this is the card you will get with it. Just a simple basic card. Has the logo on it. And everything like that from Magic. But this is Nico Bolas. And really, these are adorable. Now keep in mind for these. I know it's very tempting. Focus here, camera. You gonna play nice? You're gonna be evil to me today. Evil with me today. Yeah. So keep in mind. There we go. Keep in mind these are marked for 8 and up, and I want to make sure that is clarified because they are definitely the type of toys that people might lock onto and think this would be great for my little ones. Little ones to an extent because of all these great little accents and bits of fabric that are added on. They are deemed safe. They are deemed safe for ages up, 8 and up. Not for the younger ones. And this is speaking as a mom. There are some accents on here where I would be hesitant to give this to, say, like a small child, like 2 and under. I would not do that at all because of the fact, I mean, little kids, they like to put things in their mouth and chew on it, and I'd worry about something getting gnawed off, quite frankly. So, again, 8 and up, $11.99, available for pre-order now, and this is Nico Bolas. Let me go on to the next one. Hello, happy little hero clicks. Tempting to place them on the table when playing the real card. I mean, you know what? Why not? It might be like for good luck or good juju, depending on your thought process on that one. But honestly, I think they would be fun to bring and just sort of put on the table just to, I don't know, add to the excitement of the game. Okay, now, here we have this fellow, and this is Garuk. And every time I say his name, I feel like I'm lapsing into Klingon. I don't know why, but every single time. Another fantastically detailed plushie. Like before, you have this beautiful embroidery going on. If I get the camera I think the camera wants to focus on my face and not its face now. You have the great embroidery going on for details around here. So it's creating the details on the helmet, accenting the eyes, and again, it's a super, you can see it better here with the coloration of the helmet here, but this is extremely soft fabric. It's like that velour almost. Very soft, very touchable, which I love about this. And he's got some fun things going on too. The axe in one hand and the boots have those additional details. You can see the armor accents all around as well as the tattoo action going on here. Let me lift it up so you can see the arm. Got that little lightning bolt tattoo. Really very sweet. And the back, he's got a cape. And you can see, it even has that great jagged edge, so it's more like animal skin instead of a nicely cut fabric cape. But this is Garuk, and again, they're all $11.99. And this is the size that the other 3 pretty much sit at. Or, well, yeah, sit up because they're all in sitting positions. But it's something that was created in tandem with Kid Robot, so keep that in mind. And right now we have the 4 of these. So that is Garuk, who I think is so sweet. And then here comes this fellow, a Johnny. And I'm a big fan of this one simply because of the mane that's going on here. The mane is made of that fake fur and it floofs out nicely. As you can see here, it's kind of got like one of those crazy wild hair days. But especially on this one, the embroidery detail on the face is done so well. Between the details of the eye, even the eye has gotten some embroidery to give that iris a little bit of edge detail. And let me turn the music down. I just realized the music was really loud. Let me drop that. And furthermore, you have the scar work, switch hands, the scar work on this side, which you can see goes all the way pretty much up the top where the hairline is and cuts down across the face to about the cheek and goes across the one eye. And again, the detail with the armor, you have all these different colors, you have the different accents here. Yeah, this is honestly, Leonardo, he's one of my favorites simply because of all these fun details. So that's the front, and you have the double layering here. So the belt and then the loincloth, and you have the wraps around the ankles, even the paws. The paws have that soft fabric there. The paws are not embroidered. The paws are the material that's nice and soft there, that velour-like fabric. Let me turn around the back so you can see. And around the back, you can see that there's this band tied. Again, fun details, and here's a good sense of what that mane looks like. And you could play with this. You can fluff it out more if you want to. It's almost got like a David Lee Roth-esque look to it. And here is his cape. This is made to look more like fabric, not so much the jagged animal hide like on Garuk. And then you have the more jagged back of the loincloth and the tail. So you can see he's got a nice long tail here, and it's finished off with the same material as the mane. But everything has been stitched in tightly, stitched in well. A lot of times what you might see on toys is, especially with ribbon work like this, it will not be fully attached. So I could have run my finger all the way through and up and around. It's actually tacked on secure points, so it keeps the ribbons in place. All right, so it might shift around a little bit, but it's not one of those things where it's going to start falling off the shoulder if you start playing around with this. So everything is secure, everything is stitched on nice and tight, and those little extra embroidery accents are fantastic. They're truly very well made. And again, this is coming from having a sewing background as well. And then certainly last but not least, in terms of our Magic the Gathering products, we have another Chandra, and this time it is the Phunny. Now I want you to take a look at her eyes. Her eyes, I think, are so super well done. You can see again, it's just like a Johnny, there is the embroidery going on here, but this time with her eyes, they've given sort of a flame, because she uses flames. So you've got this flame detail going on in her iris, and it is done with the embroidery work. So you have shifting colors of yellows and oranges being used to get that effect. And I think it's just wonderful. And there's almost like a slight iridescent factor to it. So you can see there, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? And again, the stitch work is just wonderful. And I love the goggles at the top. The goggles are also that felt material. The rest is this nice plushy, super soft. I mean, you can literally just sort of like hold and pet. They're truly huggable. And I know I'm saying they're huggable and I'm the one who hugged the Chartleland Dragon, but these are squishy and lovable. And let me show you more of the details on the front of her. Let's move the card out of the way. And you can see more of the details on her are actually worked into the fabric. So they're printed onto the fabric, not necessarily separate stitch work. And then you have this double layer of the skirt. So you have the top layer here, and then a second piece here, and then you have the belt overlapping on top. Let me show you the back. And that's what the back of her looks like. So these are all of the 4 Phunny plushies, I keep wanting to call them funnies, that you will be able to get a hold of, and right now you can place on pre-order. FLGS, let them know you are interested. You still have time. Release month is October 2020, so very soon. And if you have someone who is very much into Magic the Gathering, plays it, collects all the decks and everything like that, this is one of those, all of them. These are all great products if you're starting to do your Christmas shopping or your holiday shopping ahead of time. You can very much get these pre-orders in at $11.99. It's a very reasonable price, quite frankly. I mean, I've gotten my kids toys that are this size, if not smaller, for more than that because of how much they love it. I think you're going to get a fantastic reaction from whoever the receiver is, especially if they are a huge fan of Magic the Gathering. So let me see if I can get these all. I'm going to see if I can pick them all up at the same time. So here we have, I didn't want to take the cards off because I wanted to show them what they look like when you'll get them. So here you have all of them, hopefully. Come here, Nico Bolas. Here, there we go. So here are all of them lined up next to each other. It would make a really sweet and adorable gift for someone who is into sort of like the cute factor, but also a big fan. Let's do that. We'll split them a little bit. But also a fan of Magic the Gathering as well. But they really are great. Let me show them one at a time again for those of you coming in. So once again, here's Chandra. Her eye, it's her eyes, quite frankly, that I am so impressed with. They're just such a neat detail on her. And then I'm going to pull up a Johnny. He's my favorite. I'm not going to lie. I am a cat person too, so that doesn't help. But there's just so many fun details on this. So there's that one. And hello, Gallant Goblin. Thank you for joining. And hold on, Garuk ran away. And here is Nico Bolas. And even the wings. You see that? They have the further detail going on. There's him, or them. And then finally, Garuk. Let's show your face, darling. Wearing his helmet with the horns and everything. And the axe. The axe, that's so much fun. But keep in mind, make sure that this is for 8 and above. That is what these are marked for. Little heads up on that. So those are our Magic the Gathering. Is this wave 1? Any plans on making more of the Planeswalker? Happy little hero clicks ass. I am not privy to that information, so I cannot inform you as to whether or not that will be the case. And so help me God if the school starts calling in a second. My phone just dinged me about a text. So I'm not sure if we're going to be doing more of those, but obviously once it comes down the pipeline where we're clear to make those announcements, I will make sure to let you all know here, especially if these are something that go over well and people are excited about. I mean, personally, this is truly personally. This is not, you know, according to WizKids. Personally, I would love to see more things like this, even in different lines, just because it is such a fun way to incorporate a love of a certain game into a collection. But yeah, they are too sweet. They are too much fun. I am super pleased with them. I have seen pictures of them. I hadn't seen them up close until recently, and when I saw how well these are made, the quality of the embroidery, the stitches, and then again, I'm going to geek out over here with stitching. The stitches are nice and narrow and tight together, so I know it is an extremely well-made product. It's one of those things they're going to hold up to use even if you do give these to children who are going to walk around and hug them and love them to bits. So, you know, big thumbs up on the quality of all of these that have been created. So I definitely recommend you get on over and place those pre-orders. Now, that being said, I did promise you a paint along. So if you've checked the description down below, I do have paint colors that I decided to use. I actually yesterday went and I pulled together quickly. Let me switch to the different overhead. So what I did yesterday, this is literally like I think it was like less than a half hour. I did a quick little paint on this Flumph just to get an idea of the colors that I was going to want to use. Now, it's not going to turn out exactly like this because this is one of those things where once I got it done, I took a look and I'm like, there's a couple things I want to switch. One thing I realized is that I do have in the list below of a red wash. I put the red wash over the entire thing and I wish I hadn't because it darkened it up greatly. So we're still going to be using that red wash at the end. However, it's going to be more at the base of the tendrils as opposed to over the entire miniature. That's why you will also see a flesh wash added into the list because I'm going to use a flesh wash on the top, bleed it down to about midway on the tendrils, and then feather in the red wash towards the bottom. And there's just a couple other things I'm going to do here. Now, these actually are from the D&D Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures line, our unpainted miniatures, and you get 2 in a set. All right, so here is the one I painted up yesterday. Here is the one I'm going to be painting today. However, if you decided you wanted to do this paint along with me, but you want to paint this one, everything I'm going to be doing on this one is applicable to this fellow. All right, so don't think that you have to paint the exact same one that I'm painting. Whichever of the 2 sculpts you'd like to do is completely fine. So I decided to do this one first because I sort of like the form of this a little bit more. And like I said, this was literally a quick, give me a half an hour just to get basic paint concepts going, just so I knew what paints to advise everyone to get. And this is from wave 12. for the particular Nolzur's line. For those of you wondering which wave, this is the one that just came out. So check with your FLGS if you want to get a hold of these Flumps. Flumps are, in my opinion, probably one of the most adorable creatures in D&D. And they also have a lot of fun lore and story behind them, which we can absolutely talk about while I'm painting. So if you're going to paint along with me, what I'm going to do, especially if you don't have Vallejo colors, I just grab my Vallejo paints because they're a little bit easier for me to snag and grab and bring them up away from my art studio. And it's one of those things I'm going to make a point of describing the colors as well in context to other paints you might have at hand. So I will be saying the specific Vallejo name, but I am going to be listing, or not listing, I will be speaking to what other colors you could use in its place. Now, Flumps are fun little creatures. They are aberrations. They are small. Keep in mind for the miniature though, they are more of a medium size. So I have a medium mini right here. This is from Eberron. And then here is the Flump. So a little bit larger in scale, but keep in mind, if we were to make this true to size, you'd lose a lot of the fun little details. So I think having it up into the mid size is definitely a smart way to have gone. But this is like one of those little heads up type of thing. I don't think it's going to make or break the game. If anything, I think it's great to see an adorable Flump on the table. And I don't know how many people have actually incorporated them into their games, have encountered them. So if these are something you've actually interacted with, by all means, I would love to hear stories of your Flumph encounter in the chat. And also, if you would love to help me out, I'd be thrilled if you can get some people over here and let's have some fun. Now, I'm going to get to work on this. In terms of prep work, remember, these come pre-primed, so you don't need to prime at all. There is primer already on this miniature. That is one thing that happens with all of our minis. So nice little convenient aspect. I did go through and just very briefly removed a couple mold lines that were popping out a little bit more. It happens. It's something that you can fix either with a simple file. If you have a metal nail file, you can get in there and just buff the mold line down if you want to. I have a special tool, which is right here. Hold on a minute. So this is a tool I will use often. And you can find this in your hobby shops. You can find it in your game stores. I got this one, I think, off of Amazon, I believe. But this curvature here is great for removing raised mold lines so you can smooth things out. And it does a really solid job of it. And it also gives you a little bit more control because of how you're able to hold it and grip it in your hand. So you can take it, and I'm not going to skin myself, don't worry. This also shows that it's not terribly sharp, but it gives you enough control that you can move across the surface of the miniature and it'll pull up the excess mold line that a lot of times it's more enhanced just because the primer got on it, and it's a quick and easy fix. So that's really the only prep work I have done here. Now, the other thing I'm going to show you today, which a lot of people have concerns about, people want to know what happens when you get paint on these clear plastic posts. There is a trick that I like to do that has never failed me, and I will share it with you today to show you how you can remove any paint you might get on this post. There are other tricks that I've seen people do where they'll put different sorts of compounds on that you can peel off after the fact, and then it's exposed nice and clean. My technique I just find super handy, and you're using something readily available, hopefully, in your own medicine cabinet. So I'll give you a little hint there. All right, so what I want to do is I am going to, first of all, show you the back of the packaging so you can see what Flumps look like. Now, keep in mind, these little guys, they usually have different colors, mean different moods. So a blue Flump is actually sad. Okay, so these are sad Flumps right now. If they shift over to pink, it means they're amused. Green means they are curious. So it's really up to you how you want to paint your Flumps. You can apply what I'm doing here to doing something else in a different color too, if you would like. So I already had red going. And the reason why I went with red is because I saw this fantastic picture. They're called Jellyfish Sprites, and it is a weather phenomenon. I don't know if you've seen these, but definitely get onto Google and do an image search. They basically look like these red jellyfish floating in the sky during a thunderstorm. So it's this really cool weather effect that can happen. It's not something that happens all the time. But for me, I'm like, oh, that could be a really cool way to paint a Flump. So I wasn't going to make angry Flumps, but it is helpful if you're going to be painting both of these, where maybe you might want to have one color and one another color, because when Flumps turn red, that means they're actually angry or they're agitated. And there's reason for that. And that is very much going into the lore of the Flump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get things set up. We can chat a little bit about our little Flump friends as well. And I like how Leonardo's like, we need a plushie of that. You know, I wouldn't say no to a Flump plush. I don't think I would put it down either. So the first color I'm going to be starting out with here, and this is from the game color line for Vallejo. It is called Pale Flesh. Now, it's one of those colors that falls into just a classic light peach, is what I would say for a generic color term. So find something that is in that orangey pink blend, lighter tone, and that should work really quite well for your base. The other thing I'm going to do, this is just a fun little quick painting tip. Whenever you take your miniatures out of their blisters, you can use the front part of the blister pack as an easy palette. And then what I'm doing, especially if it's just I'm painting only one mini, then this just becomes something quick and easy where when you're done, you can just toss it in the garbage. So it gets a little bit of extra use as opposed to just keeping the miniature protected. So I am going to start off with Pale Flesh from Vallejo. And again, if you're playing the home game with a different colored paint, that is definitely something that falls into a pale peach. You could even get away with something more of a pale pink if you wanted to. And in terms of my brushes, I'm actually a big fan of these. These are just brushes. They're not from Vallejo. They're brushes you can find at Walmart. They are from the Plaid line, and they're just their hobby brushes, but they have been my tried and true, and I've been using these for quite a while. So those are the brushes I'm going to use. They do have sizes on them, so I will do my best to mention the sizes as well for you. Keep in mind, whenever you're starting out with miniature painting, and this is something I always like to reiterate to beginning painters, and I'm treating this as if this is the first time you're seeing me paint. If you have seen me paint on my own channel, thank you so much for joining me today. Bear with me while I take care of just sort of the housekeeping factors. Whenever you are starting out with miniature painting, the one thing I always want to stress is that it is far more accessible than people realize. You don't necessarily have to start out with the expensive paints. You can start out with alternative options. Sometimes that might even be craft paints. I still use craft paints on many of my miniatures with fantastic results. What happens is it all boils down to working with the paints, learning how they're going to react or act on your miniature, how you need to load your brush and everything like that, and how your brush is going to work once you touch it to the mini itself. So basically, it's going to come down to practice. If you want to get into mini painting, just start. Start and see where you go with it. Dip your feet into the water. The more you do it, the more you learn, the more your hands get what's called muscle memory and get into the method of working with paints and brushes on a miniature, and you become more comfortable and more at ease as you go along. So really, really, truly highly encourage you to give it a try, give it a go, and see where it goes from there. Don't feel like that right out of the gate you have to have a perfect miniature. That's not the case. You're going to learn from those foibles and those little oopsie-daisies. Like, personally, I learned yesterday because I was using a new red wash. This red wash obliterated more of the colors that I had in there, and I've learned from that. I'm like, okay, that's a red wash. I either need to thin out greatly or adjust my plan. Like I said before, I'm going to shift to using a flesh wash on most of it instead. Say flesh wash a few times. That's going to turn into a tongue twister. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with Pale Flesh, and we're going to put this pretty much from the eye stalks down underneath its disc, and then working it into the upper portions of the tendrils is the plan here. And let me get started with that one. The other thing you'll often hear with miniature painting is that you want to thin your paints, which oftentimes can be very, very true. If you have a paint that comes out the consistency of, let's say, toothpaste, that means that that paint is far too thick and it is not going to work to your advantage. You want your paint to be the consistency, and I always use food references, okay? Because I find that food references are a little bit more universal for people to identify with when it comes to how you want it to be. So you want it to be almost like a very heavy cream, or think like a maple syrup consistency. So if you have your paint come out and it is super thick, like say toothpaste, or even like, dipping sauces like ketchup or honey mustard, that means it is far too thick and you need to add just a touch of water or two to it. Another way around it is to not load up your brush too much and just put a little dollop, and then make sure you are moving the paint around your mini to spread it out. That's another way around it. So this Pale Flesh, because it is so pale, it's not going to make a huge drastic difference on my camera. but you will see the difference in real life as you go along. You can see it takes on more of a blush-like tone with that. And again, if you have any questions while painting about what's going on or techniques or anything like that, by all means, please ask me. I always put my minis onto empty pill bottles filled with sand. You can also use rice. I think some people have used like salt in the past, but I find that sand works out pretty darn well. And that just gives a little weight to the bottle, and then you just stick it on the top of the bottle with some tack, blue tack. All right. That's how I do my mini base stands. I just find it's a lot easier to help you manipulate it around. And if you can find a medicine bottle where you can spin the lid, that also comes in super, super handy. All right, so let's see here. Let's talk about flumphs. I think that's the plural for them, flumphs. They are, like I said, they are small aberrations. They actually originate from the Underdark. All right, so this means they've been around, you know, Drow and Illithid and Aboleths and all that loveliness. And they communicate telepathically, essentially, and feed off of psionics. They're fascinating little creatures, I will say that. So because of this whole telepathic ability, they are, think of them sort of like D&D empaths is the best way to describe them. So they will pick up on the moods and the thoughts of creatures around them. Even if they can't be seen, they will react, they will respond. And that's a lot of where their coloration comes into play. It's also why they are super handy to have in an adventuring party. Because say you have, I don't know, a druid who's just positive and uplifting, and this little Flumph has sort of flocked to it because they tend to go towards the more good nature, good thoughts, someone who's positive and everything like that, because they don't want to be around people who have evil, malignant, malicious thoughts. It's just, you know, they see bad, they tend to fly away. And they have a mechanism for flying. We'll get into that. So basically, they're handy to have in adventuring parties because, and this taps back into the different colors, say you're exploring this new area and you have a Flumph companion. If you see that Flumph companion who's recently befriended the druid, if they flash red, you know something good is not out there in the nearby area. So it sort of acts as a little alarm system, if you will, that there's trouble ahead if it turns red. So I think that's a fun little thing about them. And again, they communicate with those that they choose to telepathically. So that's a fun thing as a DM to play into, especially if it's something where you can sort of, I don't know, if you're playing online, you can make use of whispers and everything like that. Well, this is what the Flumph is communicating just to you, and leave it to the party member if they want to relay that information. Or you can, you know, say it's to everyone involved. And again, I'm still putting this pale flesh up on the top of the eye stalks. And you don't need to go too thick with this. But yeah, that's a fun little thing about the Flumphs, I think, is just a game mechanism. Have it so they interact and sort of create this warning buddy system, if you will. And it always helps to move your mini around as you're painting, just in case there's any spots you've missed. There's also a specific order of operation I am taking with these, and you'll see why. So right now I want to make sure I get these eye stalks painted up. I am not worrying about the fact that I might be getting some of this pale flesh onto the eyeballs. The eyeballs we're going to be doing last. So that way we don't have to worry about anything zipping over the eyes unintentionally if we're dry brushing and things like that. It makes it so much easier to do the final details at the end of the miniature paint than trying to do the eyes first. Now, luckily, these eyes are also a little bit bigger, which makes them a little bit easier to paint too. Something to keep in mind with that. I'm going to keep going and getting this now around the front. And like I said, this is where having the sort of turntable lid is actually quite helpful. And there may be a couple times where I'm going to warn you I'm pulling out a frame so I can actually pull it up close, because oftentimes, especially if you're new to mini painting, the closer you hold the mini to your body, the more control you will have over your brush. This is also extremely helpful for people who might have to deal with things like tremors in your hand. If you find that your hand is shaking, like so, the closer you can bring it into your body, the more you can lock in against your own system and your hands will become more steady as a result. There's also little tricks like steepling your finger to give you more control and little touches like that. So that's something I also wanted to just give a quick mention and nod to. But here we go with, and if the music is too loud, please let me know. So this basically takes care of the eye stalks and the disc. Let me just quickly check under that one eye. Yeah, it looks like, this is why I said spinning it around will definitely help. I just want to get the underneath there, if that's better. Ironically, sometimes the camera shows more than what the naked eye will see too. And if you should have any questions, please feel free to ask away. Now, because I told you I have a method for removing paints off the clear post, I'm not going to get too worried if I get paint on the post itself, because that's just an extra stress you don't need to worry about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work this paint in and behind and around, as you can see there. Doing my best to keep it into the camera frame so you can see what I'm doing here. And what I want to do is I want to get this pale flesh on the disc of the Flumph, and then I'm going to start feathering it down the tendrils. Like, see right now my brush slipped a little bit. I know I can get that off, so I'm not even concerned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this same pale flesh, and I'm going to start bringing this peach down, or pale flesh, peach if you are using a generic, and I'm just going to start working this down the tendrils. And in terms of the brush I'm using a smaller brush right now. This is a 10/0. Let me pull that in for you so you can see that. Just because I find that a narrower brush in a tight spot actually works out a little bit better. And there's going to be points where I really can't keep this completely in frame so you can see, because if I do that, then I can't see. And that becomes problematic. I'm just going to keep going with this again. And you'll find you kind of need to tuck in every so often because you have these tendrils. They're not tentacles, they're tendrils that they kind of layer over each other. So it helps to go back in. And you kind of need to poke the brush in, if that makes sense. But I'm just feathering this down about midway. I'm not taking it down the full length of the tendrils, but more to the midpoint of the length of them. Like here I'm gonna have to pull out a frame so I can get this angle here. I can see there's a little spot I'm not able to get by holding it in the camera for you to see. So just give me a minute to get those. And the other big thing for new painters when you're just starting out, don't forget there is something called the 3-foot rule. What's the 3-foot rule? Well, unless you're painting these for competition purposes, like you're entering them or something like that, more often than not, these are things that are going to be seen 3 feet away from the viewer at the table. So that means it's easy when you get into painting to hyper-focus on every last little detail. And if something should slip or that type of thing, get worried about it. But honestly, especially when you're just starting, this is something where once you put it on the table, those little things you're going to be the one aware of. Pretty much no one else will, unless they pick it up and go, let me look at your mini. Well, that's where the story changes. So don't let this idea that it has to be absolutely perfect right out of the bat stop you from trying it out. Now, I often will flip my minis around to get into different angles and everything. I highly recommend you do that too. So right now I'm trying to get in here and get those back tendrils, as well as get into these the layer factors that are going on as they overlap one another. So I'm just gonna take a little bit of water. It's getting drier out. And you will notice that's another thing with paints, depending on the time of year. We're finally into fall. How did that happen? I'm serious, how do we already get into fall? Because that's just like, huh? It's fall? So yes, we're already into fall. Happy fall, happy autumn. And my paints always, once the humidity drops out of the air, they start to dry up a little bit on me. And what I will do is I will just every so often, I just did it actually, I will go in and dip into my water pot and just grab a little dollop of water onto the brush itself and then put it into the paint. And that just sort of helps thin it back out again. The other thing you could always opt to use, and this is, you know, it depends on your style. I have tried to use these. I'm not a fan of them. But there are things called wet palettes which help keep your paints workable for a long period of time because they keep the moisture in the paint. So that's another little product. You can actually make your own. You will see that people sell them, but you can make your own. It's basically just putting wet paper towels into a Tupperware bin, and then you take wax paper and you put a sheet of wax paper on the top, and then all you need to do is put your paints on that wax paper, and because of the humidity of the towel underneath, it will help keep your paints workable for a longer period of time. Some people can even put the lid on the Tupperware container, and that means you can go back to using those paints at a later time, like if you have to stop for some reason. So that's a little painting tip to share with you. So again, I'm going through, I'm only bringing this down midway on the tendrils. And I'm not making it a perfect end stop. I am leaving this so it's sort of a feathery look to the paint. And that is so I can blend in the other colors that I want to do. I'm almost half tempted to shift this into a pink, more of a pink than a red, so that I can use this on my table as, you know, happy-go-lucky, tra-la-la, amused little Flump to something's wrong, red Flump. So we'll see. We're gonna see where I go with this. But it'll still be using all the paints that I mentioned, so don't even worry about that. So let me go through, still getting the tendrils. And again, feathering it down with the smaller brush. You may also see other products out there for thinning paints, flow aids and that type of thing. You are welcome to use those if you so choose as well. A lot of it is geared more towards airbrush painting, but you'll find that sometimes it comes in handy for brush painting. Brush and bristle. Okay, so I am just going through and making sure now, kind of turning this around more, looking for any further spots that might need a touch of the pale flesh. I think we're looking pretty darn good. And sometimes you'll see as a paint dries, it might have, there you can see it right there, it might have a modeling effect, which also happens. It's better to do thin layers than to try and do thick layers. The thicker your layer on a miniature, then the more that's going to start marring and filling in finer details, which you don't necessarily want to run into. So what I'm going to do, just to kind of give this more of an even coverage, I'm adding in yet a little bit more. I just put a little bit of water on my paintbrush, and I'm thinning this out more, so now it's almost like a puddle of milk as opposed to a heavy cream or a syrup. So it's not quite at the level of it being a wash. It's not even at a level of it being a glaze, but it's just enough, especially it's the disc area that I'm noticing it. I'm just going to do one more light layer of the pale flesh on the disc just to help even this tone out a little bit more. And you'll find that does the trick. So you may find you need to do that is go back in, thin out your paint just a touch more, and get one last thin layer of the color needed if it's starting to show up as a little bit more of a mottled consistency or a mottled finish. And you'll find that happens with lighter colors, especially with yellows. Yellows are notorious for being patchy. And there are some different tricks to that, like you can actually put down a bright pink or an orange underneath, and that will help give you a more consistent yellow coverage in the long run. And if you hear any creaking, it's my table. I'm right at the fold point, so there's this creak that happens whenever I place pressure on it. All right, let me see here. Almost done with pale flesh. I'm happy with that. So, a little bit easier if I take the black background. So you can see the difference in the color here. Is that a little spot? Yep, that is a little spot I want to get. There we go. So now I have that peachy creamy color at the top. Again, very similar to the artwork we have going on here for the Flump, but we're not making this a sad Flump. I think we're gonna go for the amused Flump. So that being done, I'm now gonna shift into my next color. Still using this same finer tip brush, I am going to do a little bit of a rinse. Very quick and simple. And just blot that quickly. And next we're going to jump into, it is listed as Gory Red in the list in the description below. It's really more of a nice traditional cardinal red. All right, so that brighter red that tends to have a more blue undertone to it. It's not like a fire engine red or a brick red. Fire engine red tends to have an orangey undertone to it. Brick red will have a brown undertone to it. Cardinal red is more of your blue undertone, mid-tone red, mid-level red, I should say. So if you have a red like that, you want to snag that. I'm just going to put a drop here into my impromptu blister palette. See? Just like that. Now mine is already, and this has always been like this for this particular paint, it's runnier, like you can see, even on my finger. You can see it rolls around a little bit, so I'm not thinning this. I don't need to thin it, it's not necessary. Yes, I have shaken this out. I have a couple of bottles that for some reason they're a little bit more liquidy. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm actually going to go in and do a slight blend of, I should show you. So what I'm gonna do is a slight blend between the pale flesh and the cardinal. And I'm just gonna incorporate those two together and you get that color going, okay? And then I will test off it on my own. Yeah, I like that. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back into the tendrils. Let's see here, who's calling? I forgot to put the phone out of the room today, my apologies. Anyone from Westfield NJ calling me? Do I need to pick that up? I will if, you know, I need to take on a personal call here, but all right, so I am going to go to, let's take a look at these tendrils in fourths, okay? So I took it midway, so I took it halfway down. Now I'm gonna move back up to the half that was covered, and I'm gonna go 3/4 up the tendrils, and I'm just gonna start pulling this color down towards the bottom of the tendrils. And it is okay if you start layering your colors here, because what I want to do is get more of the color pulled down, and then I'm going to show you what I do to feather it up. Okay, so I'm pulling this down. I'm going to do this on all of them, starting at about 3/4 the way up the tendril. You can see that going on there. So I've got that going. And I'm quickly rotating it around just to get to the different spots. Like so. And this is something where you might want to work a little bit more quickly for the blending aspect. I'm going to put that brush down. Hopefully it doesn't roll away on me. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a flathead brush like this. It is a clean brush. Doesn't look it, but it is clean. It's just well used. And then what I do is I use the clean brush to sort of feather it. And you do need to do this while the paint is still slightly wet, and you can see it starts to blend up. So you pull the majority of the paint down and then feather that little section up more, just like that. So it gives it more of a blended effect right there. And this is something we're going to keep going back and forth and doing. All right, so I'm happy with that, which means I'm going to keep going on to the rest of the tentacles. She says as she keeps going. But that's sort of a quick trick way of blending. So let me go back to my mixed color. I'm actually going to mix up a little bit more of this to be fair. I want to make sure I have enough. So I'm still taking my pale flesh and my gory red to create this in-between tone. I just want to make sure I have enough of it going for myself. Okay, that gives me a little bit more. And then same thing, I'm just going to go back in, starting up, and then just quickly pulling down, just like this. And like I said, you do want to move a little bit quickly on it because what you don't want to lose is the moisture in the paint to help you blend up into the pale flesh. Like you'll notice, I'm not so much concerned about the bottom part of the tendrils because I know those will be addressed as I continue down, but it's the top portions I want to get to right now. Okay, happy with that. I'm going to go back to my flat brush and then just quickly go in and just work with the paint before it gets too dry and just soften the edge there. As you can see it happening right there. There you go. Now say that got a little bit too dry on you ahead of time. If that happens, let me take the brush out so you can hear me. All you would need to do is actually dip into the color itself, remove excess, actually matches my flesh almost, and then you would do something called dry brushing where you would just quickly dry brush to blend it. Oop, let me get that in frame and show you. To blend it just a touch more is another little quick trick for getting a gradient going. All right, so that is the story there, and I'm going to keep going around and doing that because I want to get this up on that upper section of the tendrils. But again, having that little bit of moisture there does help for the blending part. Let me get over here. How we are doing? Okay, so we're getting up to the top of the hour. Probably finish this around 1:30, just a heads up for those who are watching, theoretically. And I'm going to quickly bring that down and keep going. And you'll find on the underside it's going to get a little tricky because of limited space. Let me pull that into frame so you can actually see. And that's okay. Do your best to get the paint in there, in the area in which you can work. And I'm going to quickly just go in and feather that. And it's basically just working around and doing that. Pulling the paint. Making sure you can see something here. And again, don't worry about that post. There is a trick to getting paint off that post that is really very easy and quite handy. It also works, like say you might have a mistake. You'll see when the time comes. I will use it sometimes if I realize something got a paint color I didn't want it to. It works in a quick pinch to quickly remove a layer of paint. So I have that in there, and I'm just going to quickly jump back in and blend with my wider brush. And if you're just joining us, the one in the picture, if you caught this is what I'm painting today. It is definitely more red. I'm trying to find a good angle here. I have to pull out a frame for this part. Sorry, folks. This one I'm giving it more of a pinkish tone because the color of the Flump actually reflects the Flump's mood. So we want a little pinkish tone, friend, or maybe like sort of an in-between. That way we know they are amused. Unamused is red. Unamused is anger or agitated or fearful when it comes to Flumps. So let's see. Oh, some more about the Flumps. So you can see I just did that. And let me do that blending. Pulling that down. There you go. You can see right there. All right, let me flip around. So right now I'm just checking to be sure. Yep, I have all the tendrils addressed. Like so. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to blend the Gory Red more with the pale flesh to continue the gradient color. So that means pulling in more of, you can see mine is very liquidy. So it's pulling in more of the Gory Red to the pale flesh because I want to make that color that much more deep in tone. Like so. You can see it's gotten darker. It actually almost matches my handle. And it's a similar thing, only this time I'm gonna go so we're about halfway down and pull the color down and then feather up with the dry brush, or with the drier brush. So same thing. I'm gonna blot down a little of the excess. Now we're halfway. I'm just gonna quickly pull this across the tendrils. Working as I go. But let's see here. Let's talk more about the Flumphs. They have, let me pull this up while we chat. They have the ability to float, and it's sort of like through this force field-esque air propulsion type thing. And that's actually where the name Flumph comes from, because it's sort of like the sound they make, Flumph, when they move. Just another fun little flavor to add to your game. So if you're the DM in this case and you're moving your Flumph around, you can be like, and he flumphs across the board. Just little fun accents like that, I think, are endearing to incorporate. I'm just gonna keep going around doing that. So it's like taking it from halfway down is really the best way to go about this. And if you're joining me, just go at your own pace. Or if you have a question and you're painting along with me, please, please, please feel free to ask. I'm also not going to get concerned about if I should get any of this on my base, because the base we're going to do towards the end as well. So don't get worried if your base gets some of these colors onto it, because that will be addressed and covered. All right, here we go. Going to blend really quick. And you can see right there, if I get it in focus, it just creates that nice gradient of colors moving up. Like so. Just keep going around doing that. I will get there. Little by little. But yeah, so they have that fun little mechanism for moving around. Size-wise, it's almost like they sound like a flattened football in terms of scale to a humanoid. It's like they are about the width of shoulders, of a humanoid's shoulders, and then as thick as an arm for the disc size, if you're putting this in context of the game. I'm not quite sure about how long the tendrils can get. That's something else entirely. I didn't look into that. But just to give you an idea of where they stand, or float rather. And I like to think of them sort of as little skunks, because they have this, it's like this sticky self-defense mechanism that smells horrific. So they will use that to defend themselves as well. So it's like, you know, if you scare a Flump, you need to take a tomato juice bath. I'm not sure if that is the literal way of treating it, but just something to keep in mind with them. Just another fun little quirk. I mean, you could even have a hysterical encounter with your players' first go around, where they meet the Flump gets scared, and whoof, someone in the party is not smelling like roses afterwards. But along with that, they also have acid that they can shoot out of. I believe it's out of the tentacles too. So it's a fun, dynamic little critter, I will say. And again, sort of a fun, trying to get these and keep these in a good angle. Sort of a fun little way to work in, you know, different dynamics. An enemy is coming, it turns red, or maybe it just picked up some information that the party isn't privy to because it got it through its telepathic abilities, but suddenly it's glowing pinkish or green. So that kind of becomes a cue for the party to be like, hey, what's going on here, little one? And it can speak to that with the party in general. Just something cool there. They really are neat. I enjoy them. So as you can see, it's blending through, and I am working around. I do find I have to keep spinning this though because of those different bits of the tendrils getting up and under. Just something fun. And I am making a point to take it all the way down now, actually, because I'm going to do a little bit of a darker tone. And oftentimes you'll discover as something starts drying, you'll need to go back and just do a quick little touch up because you may have missed a spot. It happens. It absolutely happens. Not the end of the world, not to worry. All right, let me keep working here. And I'm just going to flip back over to the blending. Like so, for the gradient, which you can see happening. All right, still a couple more to go, and then we'll phase into that final color where I'm going to switch to Scarlet Red. Right? Yep, Scarlet Red. So the Scarlet Red is more of a purplish undertone to the red. So if you have almost like, I'd say like a rich ruby red, if you will, for that one. And which tentacle was I going for? I believe it was these. That's just it, I'm losing track of my tentacles. Or tendrils. I keep saying tentacles. Tendrils. Here it was. That was the spot I was seeing. So there's this little spot over here. Once I started rotating around, I noticed. And here we go. And these back ones, you can see them right there hiding on me. Gonna get in here, get some color on those, and quickly take my other brush and just do a quick little feathering action there and see how we're doing there. It's looking pretty good. All right, so right now I'm literally just spinning it around. I am gonna have to pull this out of frame, pull it in tight to me so I can get to this point that I need to reach, where it gets a little bit trickier. The joys of mini painting on stream. Sometimes you can't keep it in frame, folks, because you need to see it. All right, so basically I just went in and I reached back through here is where I'm trying to get a little bit more easily. That backspace there, you can see there's this little bit. Can I can. All right, so sometimes you can actually lift and manipulate. So I'm using my thumbnail to lift so I can get this bit here that I have not been able to reach quite yet. And get in there and get this color down. Here we go. All right. So that, going to quickly spin around a little bit here. That should do it. I am going to go in. I may have tried just a touch. Nope, we're good. Just do a little bit more feathering there. So that is my 3 colors on the tendrils now, and I want to darken it up towards the bottom just a little bit more. And that's where we're going to switch into Scarlet Red. What I'm doing here is I'm just quickly brushing through. But that shows you how this is starting to blend a little bit. I'm actually going to do just a touch up in here. I am going to take what little is left on my brush now, and I'm going to take it along the edge of the Flumph's disc. It's almost like putting blush on your Flumph. But there is now enough paint on this to add the pigment to the disc without it overpowering it. You can see right there. I'm just going to go around a couple sweeps and literally give it a little blush, like So, and because that brush doesn't have a whole bunch of paint loaded up on it, it doesn't completely blur out the color underneath. It looks like it has a glow of that color instead. All right, so you can see that going on for the disc. Now I'm going to do that last little bit because I want to get it just a little bit darker on the tendrils at the very end. Hello, Ed Fortune. When did you jump in? Thanks for joining. Hopefully you're still there. And thank you, Leonardo. I appreciate that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to Scarlet Red. Like I said, this is more of a ruby red. So you can see there's that purple tonality to the red itself. So you don't want a bright reddish red of the orange undertone. You want the cool tone. Now I'm definitely dipping into cool tones. So that I'm going to shake up again for good measure. And then just a little drop of this. You don't need too much. A little goes a very, very long way when you get to this point. I do want to rinse both of my brushes at this point. So this is just straight up water. Keep in mind when it comes to water, be aware of what your tap water is like. If your tap water is hard water, that means you have minerals in it. And oftentimes those minerals can start to play with the paints and how they oxidize. So it might shift the color of the paint. It might also actually shift the texture of the paint. So what you want to make sure you do is if you know you have a hard water issue with your tap water, just simply take some drinking water, filtered water. If you have a filter, use that water instead, and that can make a world of difference. Distilled water is honestly your best friend when it comes to painting, but you know, if you don't want to keep going out and buying distilled water, though it's not exactly expensive, it is completely up to you. And thank you, Epic Dwarf, I appreciate that. Okay, so both of these brushes, both my Ratty Tatty flat and the one that I have been using, this nice little detail brush here, the 10/0. And I do that. I know I get yelled at, why are you looking at brushes? So what I'm going to do now, I'm dipping back into my pale flesh, and this time I'm mixing it in with Scarlet Red. And this is going to give us our little pink tips to the tendrils. So I'm just going to get this going here until I get it to about the color tone that I want. You can see it's taking on a nice pinkish tone, which is what I was hoping to see. And when I'm blending, I kind of create like a blending zone and there's this midline. Once I get the color I want, I stay away from the midline and I focus more on blending this. So now I have more of that pink that I want to add to the tips. All right. So I'm going to just testing right now. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so I'm going to go back in now. And instead of pulling down, I'm actually going to just sort of pull in a little bit where I can. But I'm trying to keep this color to the bottom quarter of the tendril, as you can see right there. Just like that. And work that quickly with the other brush and get the feathering effect going. So now we're getting that little pink at the end of its tendrils. So we know this darling is amused. And then I'm also going to use this pink up on the eye stalks. I think that'll be a fun way to handle it. So again, I'm just taking these tendrils and I'm working the color from the bottom up now. And getting it where I can. The other thing you could do if you wanted, and this is depending on your comfort level, if you ever want to sort of slightly alter where the tendrils are directed, you can warm things up either even with just a hair dryer will do the trick, or you can put it into a bit of hot water and then immediately move it to cold water, holding the tendrils or whatever it is you're reshaping in the position you want it to be, and the plastic will then hold that form usually. Sometimes the plastic has a strong memory to it and it won't budge as well, and you might have to do a few repeated treatments. I always recommend if you are playing around with that type of thing that you make sure to check that it holds its form. Like give it about a week before you start painting it and check that it holds its form before going in and painting it, because sometimes you might be like, oh, I reshaped it, and within a few days the plastic will go and do what you don't want it to do. Another trick you can do is once you have it held in place by the cool water, to make sure it really registers with the plastic, because plastic has its own memory, you can pop it into a freezer. And the chill of the freezer will help sort of reinforce where you want that plastic to actually hold firm if you're reshaping your miniatures, tendrils, weapons, even stance. So that's just a little tip there for you. Okay, let me quickly blend that. There we go. There is pulling out of frame because there's a little spot I need to get. That is not easy to get with camera in front. There we go. There's just this little white spot right back in there that is being stubborn. All right, I think we got it there. I'm just gonna keep going around. So like I said before, if this is something where you wanna paint your Flumph, say green or blue or a darker red, like my first one, you absolutely can do it using these techniques. It's just a matter of going back in and basically blending your colors from the lightest at the top of the tendrils down to your end goal color. In this case, the pink is what I am hoping, well, not hoping for, what I was aiming for with this one. And a lot of it just boils down to making sure you can blend when the time comes. Let me get that blending going again. In this case, because of the shape of these, I am pulling down and not up like I have, which is perfectly fine. But now you can start seeing it's graduating into a pink at the bottom. Oh, there we go. I caught it, I caught it. Same thing, just gonna go through and get all these tendrils now. And it gets a little bit more finicky just because this is where the tendrils start to spread out from each other. So you'll find you'll need to move it around, spin it around a little bit here and there, just to check that you're getting every angle there. Just gonna go in quickly and blend. Blend those. So here you go. It's taking shape. Yeah, I got the underside. And I'm basically, since it's the end and you have more access to these tendril ends, I'm doing front and back instead of going around and doing the front and then the inside like I had initially done. Because at this point it's almost easier to do it in these sections like I'm doing right now. Okay, quick blending. And don't forget, I did rinse this brush out before switching to the more pinky tone at the end. But that gives you an idea of how these are going now as it moves its way down. Okay, so let me see here. Do you want to get a little bit more up there? Bear with me. But we're getting close. A couple more sections of the tendrils and then I'll work on the eye stalks in this color. And then I can show you the trick for removing any paint that I got on that clear post. That is super easy to do. You know what? I'm not going to tempt fate. Let me quickly get this one. There we go. And let me go over here. But yes, I have not had the chance as a player to encounter a Flumph, and I would absolutely love to. Hint, hint to all of my DMs, if any of you are watching. I want to meet a Flumph! I have created a Flumph in my own homebrew BB's Place, which is the game that I like to use at D&D to Castle as a fun pickup one-shot deal. It has functioned as a mini campaign over on Set Teens Gilding Light. That was a lot of fun. But I have a little Flumph waiting in the wings. No one has ever, this is a funny thing, no one's ever gone to where Freddy likes to hang out. And yes, I named him Freddy Flumph. So one of these days, hopefully someday, someone will sort of venture into the little zone where Freddy likes to hang out and just observe life and the world around him. and we'll get some fun Flump interaction. All right, last blending on this one. And let me just do a quick spin. So now you can see these the tendrils have this gradation of color going on. Like so. And what I am going to do, I'm just going to, no, not that one. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly take this brush, the one that has a little bit of this pink left, and just sort of bring it up along the way. Just like that. Really quick, nothing major, but sort of like what I did here around the disc itself. Use that pink blushy color and bring it up the tendrils just a touch more. I find that helps. So we have that going. And now I'm going to get the pink on the top of the eye stalks. Just a touch, actually. I need a little bit more moisture. My paint's getting a little dry there. Nothing too major. Still completely workable. I just need a little extra touch of water. All right, so now I have that. Just doing a quick check. And now I'm simply going to, remember how I said at the beginning, I'm not going to worry too much about getting onto the eyeballs themselves, because that's going to be something we're going to do at the end. So I'm putting this color at the very top of the eye stalks. Just a quick touch, nothing too crazy. And now I'm going back to my brush and I'm just bringing this color down a little bit. Just blending it down. Very quick, very simple. Just a little something to add a touch of color. And you may find that you want to go back and forth and do this, or you may just want to leave it on the lighter side of things. But it just gets that hue going onto the eye stalks now. Like that. Okay? And then the last thing I'm going to do is just get a little bit into its mouth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Scarlet Red that's mixed a little bit with the flesh. And you can see it's got this cute little mouth right there. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to get that colored in. Just like that. Very carefully. Change the angle a little bit. There we go. Just going to blot that a little bit. Yeah, there's still a little bit more I need to get over here. Just for this little fellow. There we go. So now it has its mouth painted in, and you can see the hue of the blush that was brought through as it slips down into pinks at the very bottom. So we have our amused Flump. All right, so I'm gonna let these colors dry a little bit because I wanna do a flesh wash on this completely. But what I don't wanna do is put it on and then, because the paints are still wet, the flesh wash slips off, or the flesh wash starts to muddy things, because that can happen. So if you get, we're gonna switch gears, if you happen to get paint onto your clear plastic posts, very quick and easy fix to this. I'm switching over to just a fluffier, older brush. This is one of my older brushes, but I like it for this technique. I also like to use it for my washes. So what I'm gonna do is just take some rubbing alcohol. This is 70% rubbing alcohol in my little container. This is actually from the Zombie Paint Night kit, by the by. I like that it has a lid. So I always keep a little bit of rubbing alcohol nearby, especially if I'm working with these clear bases. And all you need to do is just go in and get some of this rubbing alcohol on the brush, and then you put it onto where those spots of paint are. And you want to just carefully work it over where the paint accidentally got onto the post. And what I'm doing is I'm blotting off what's pulling up off the post onto a paper towel. And you'll see the pigment of the paint definitely starts to lift. Now, if for some reason, you can see how it's being pulled up, if for some reason you get some of this onto your mini, because it is rubbing alcohol, just quickly blow and it'll dry it so that it won't affect or mar your paint. So that is my little trick for working paint colors off of these posts. And you may find you have to do a couple passes because it might be a little cloudy, which is what I'm seeing right now. Although quite frankly, working with a red in there, I'm not surprised it's going to take a couple passes. But this is also why I am not doing the base first, because if for some reason any of this starts to puddle, it's puddling on the base where there hasn't really been any color put in yet. So things are okay in that boat. Yeah, there's a little bit some here that I want to get to. So that's a little trick for getting paints off of your clear posts without getting into your paint jobs. See, all gone. Very quick, very easy. And another thing you can do with these after the fact, when it comes time to seal them, if you seal them with a high gloss finish, it actually, I'm trying to do it just so you can see, the glossy look helps it blend in a little bit more too, I have found. But that just took care of all the paint on the clear base there. So we're getting close on this little guy. Now what I want to do is I want to work on his eyes. So I'm going to put the rubbing alcohol away. We don't need that anymore. And I'm just going to go to classic white and classic black. You don't need a lot of this. Just a little dot of paint will do ya. A little dot will do ya. So I'm going to get a dot of white in. Of course, as I say that, I'm feeling this starting to resist me. So watch it come on a big bloop. No, there we go. Okay, nice little dot of white. And I'm going to go back to, where is it? Yeah, I'm going to go back to the brush I was initially using. I always do that to tip my brushes. And all you need to do when it comes to eyes especially is just get a bead of the paint onto the tip of the brush, okay? And let that bead of paint work with you. It helps to hold the mini in close to you. And then what I like to do is just guide the bead of paint in a stippling motion onto the eyeball itself. Just like that, okay? Quick little trick for eyes. I'm actually gonna turn this over now to get the other one going. Same thing, I'm bracing. I have that bead of paint at the top. I'm just going to stipple that eyeball on. And I'm just going to compare it to the other one. I want to make sure they're about the same size. Like so. And that gives me my two little white eyes. Okay, so that obviously we want that to dry. All right, if we do that before it's dry and you go to put in your pupil, then we run into some problems there. So I'm going to just quickly rinse this brush and I'm going to jump over to a different brush and we're going to work on the base. So the base, I'm just going to do a nice gray tone. And since we have black, because we need black for the pupils, I'm going to go in and put a drop of black next to that white and use the bottom of my brush to mix the two together to get a nice dark gray going. You don't have to have all of the colors, you can mix your colors together. All right, so now I have a nice dark gray. I'm going to start applying that to the base of the Flumph. Very straightforward and simple. Like so. And that way, that will have some time to dry, and I can go back in and dry brush on a lighter gray when all is said and done, because there is a nice little bit of texture to the base itself, sort of like a rocky texture. The gray is also good for covering up any slipped bits of color like you can see on there. So you can just go in there and get that covered up. Just be careful as you get to those tendrils. Try your best not to get gray on it. And we're getting there. About 5 minutes left. That's about on par with what I was expecting. Might go slightly over that, but we shall get there. Very careful here. Actually, is this the one where, oh, yep, this is the one where I can lift. Don't forget, you can manipulate just a little bit if you have spots that are getting tight. And that way you can get to where you need to go. And just, as long as you take your time with it. There we go. You can reach what you need to and not get to those tendrils. Which is exactly what I don't want to do. And I'm just going to tuck in here because there's just that little bit of white left that I want to reach. Alright. Very carefully get there. And then just go around and make sure you've got your sides. And that gives us a gray base to work off of. So we're going to let that dry. At this point, I know the white on my eyes is dry, which is what I want. So I'm going to go back in and give it, you know, and that's just at Epic Dwarf. That's where having the rubbing alcohol on hand helps strip the paints away. So it doesn't have to be such a concern or a worry, because I know that comes up a lot. That's probably one of the most asked questions that I get as a miniature painter. How do I handle keeping that part clear? And honestly, it's just rubbing alcohol on a brush. You can even use a Q-tip. If you have one of the bigger guys and it's more open, a Q-tip works beautifully, quite frankly. Okay, so I want to get his little eyeballs with the pupils on it. So I'm gonna go back to my black. And this time, because I just need a dot, I'm going back to my little brush. And don't laugh, I literally just dipped into the top portion of the bottle. I'm not even squirting it out onto the palette, I don't need to. And then what I'm gonna do is have it so it's looking up at me. And I find, especially with cute creatures, it helps to have the pupils aim upwards, just to kind of give it like the sad puppy dog eye. So I know what I wanna do here is just put in a dot about so. And about so. And again, if you have that bead of paint on your brush, you can use that bead to your advantage and dot it on. And now you have your little Flump looking up at you. I'm gonna let it dry just a touch more before I do the dots to really give it the, I'm like, wait, am I rinsing this off in the wrong one? So let me rinse this brush one more time down, and we're gonna go shifting back over to white so that we can give it just a little eye glisten. And like I said before, I don't need a lot, so I'm basically just sticking my brush into the tip of my white. Although, hold on. I haven't used this white in a while, now that I'm noticing that. Let me get that cleaned off. I lied. Hold on. No, don't lick it when there's paint on it. That's not what you want to do. I'm going to do another dollop of white in my little palette, because when we're done, I'm getting a paper clip and I'm opening up my white a little bit more. It's got this dried chunk at the very, very tip of it, which is just ever so much fun to work with. So going back in, getting a dot of white going, flipping them over, and then same concept, I'm just going to quickly and very small dot, and dot. So now he's looking up, and the stalks are kind of going in different directions too, so that makes it interesting. But now he is looking up at you with these little sad puppy dog eyes. I'm actually going to, hold on, I want to get a little bit more there. So there you go. He's got those sad little eyes going. But that is what we're going to do for that. And now, since I see that the paint on this is dry, I'm going to flip over to Flesh Wash. All right, this is important. It's a flesh wash for the upper portion of this fellow. I'm just going to put in a couple drops. Out of frame. It's in my palette. It's towards the back if you really want to know where I put it. And then going back to that brush that I was using, like I said, I like to use it for washes too. I'm going to go back in And I'm going to just start putting, yeah, this is better. I'm going to start putting this flesh wash onto the upper portion of the Flumph. What I don't want to do is have it turn dark, dark red like before. And what happened with that. And this is the Vallejo flesh wash, as I said before. And I will say, this happens often with smoother surfaces. When it comes to a wash, you will see the brush strokes show up a little bit more. So sometimes it'll help. Sometimes it just settles on its own. This one's tending to do that a little bit more. So sometimes you may have to go back over and just help distribute it a little bit more evenly. But I'm going in and I'm just giving this flesh wash. I'm even taking it up the eye stalks. Nothing too crazy, and you're going to avoid the very top so you don't get the eyes. You don't want those hit with it. Really, it's just a matter of making sure you're moving the wash around so it's not puddling up too much. All right, we'll call it quits there. All right, good. It didn't turn bright red. Yay! I'm gonna go back, and I'm going to apply it on the upper portion of the tentacles, just to bring out the layering details you have in these tentacles. So apply it all around, even on the inside. See, it's getting on there. Get through here. There we go. And it just raises up the details of the tentacles a little bit more. People will jokingly call washes talent in a bottle. Quite frankly, if you can use them and you enjoy the outcome, then do so. Why not? And let me get the inside now. Get under the disc too. Get that wash on. So again, start with the flesh wash. Do not jump right into the red wash. And you may find that you have to go back in. If it starts to puddle, all you need to do is just dip the tip of your brush in there after you've blotted off on a paper towel, and it'll wick away the excess wash. That's another fun little thing to keep in mind. Here we go. Just going around making sure I'm getting every little thing in there. So that is where I have put the flesh wash on this. And now I am, hold on. I'm gonna cap my black. I did not do that. Now I'm gonna go over to the red wash, okay? So now we'll flip up to the red wash. And a little of this is gonna go a long way, though I do want just a touch more. I'm gonna rinse my brush that I've been using for the wash, so that bigger, fluffier one. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this at the end of the tendrils, because I want that red there. I just didn't want it as intense of a red as the initial one came out. So now I'm going to place this more towards the bottom. And you can see. So kind of where the flesh wash ended. And it helps if you're doing this while they're still damp, so that you can blend the two together. But now this is going to go on here. Okay? This is really where that pinkish tone is going to pop out more, because of that red going over on the wash. I'm just going to work around. Like that. And don't forget to get under the tendrils too, not just the top outer portions. But that's where, when I realized how the first one was drying, I'm like, red on the whole thing, not so much. That's why you'll see the difference between these two, and I'll show you side by side. But I did want to try and get something painted up yesterday so I could refer those of you who wanted to paint along to colors I would be using. We are almost there. Okay, so here it is with the red wash on the bottom to really make those look more pink at the base. Okay, so we have that going. Bring it into focus. Last thing I want to do is just bring out the texture of that just a touch more. So all I have to do is go back to my white, and I'm going to put that back into where I mix the black and white together to get a dark gray. And this time I'm aiming for a very light gray. And it's just going to be 2 colors. I'm not going to go crazy here. So let me go to this one. Mix this up. Again, I don't want this as a dark gray. I want this to be a very light, almost a silvery gray. You can see right there. Just a nice silvery gray. And if you haven't done dry brushing before, just quickly rinse this before I forget, otherwise we're gonna have pink. Don't wanna do pink. If you haven't done dry brushing before, it's basically taking a brush, dipping it into the paint. You don't load the brush up. You dip it into the paint, just get a little bit going, and you pull off the excess onto a paper towel. And then what's left, you pull across the texture, hovering over the top of the base, and you can see it just brings out the texture that is in the base a little bit more. It enhances it a little bit, okay? So that is what dry brushing is. If you ever hear that term being used, that's what they mean when you dry brush onto the base, but now you can see all that fun extra bit of detail going on there. Now the question is, can I get back here again? I'm gonna try. If I could just do a very quick little, there we go. I'm not gonna stress too much about that. So here you have our little pink Flumph all set and ready to go. Now, what I am going to do when this is done, and this is gonna take a little bit of time to dry because of the wash, what I will do when I'm done, just to kind of give it a fun little iridescent look, I'm gonna go in with hammered copper. And I do have it on the original Flump, but again, kind of got lost because of the darkness of the wash. I'm gonna go back in and do that dry brushing technique I just showed you, but do it across the tentacles just to kind of give it this sort of iridescent look to it, because Flumps have this sort of bioluminescence to them. And I wanna try and nod to that using hammered copper. You could, if you wanna keep it even paler, you could use straight up silver from Vallejo and do that instead. But that is what I did just to kind of get a little extra glow here. But as you can see, there are still wet spots to my wash that I don't want to blend and muddy the two together. So this guy's gonna need some time to dry, probably like about an hour or so is a safe bet. And then I'd go in with the hammered copper and just take it along the tendrils. You could even do around the disc itself. I don't know why I'm doing it to my own face. You could do it around the disc itself if you wanted to. Again, just to kind of give it that little shimmery glow. But that is the Flump from today, our little pinkish Flump in comparison to our red Flump. But you can actually see the difference, because this Flump started off looking like, this one started out looking like this guy. And then when I put the red wash all over, it was a complete game changer. So I'm much happier flipping over to a flesh wash for the majority of the body and then jumping into the red wash for the ends of the tentacles. I had never used this red wash before, and it's intense. So just something to keep in mind. But yeah, so those are our Flumps from the D&D Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures line. You've seen a quick way to help get those bits of paint off that clear post. And you've gotten a little bit of floor lump? No, Flump lore for your own knowledge and whatnot. And if you painted along with me, I would absolutely love to see what you did. I'm going to switch screens here. Just give me a quick little minute. If I can find my mouse, that's the trick. There's the mouse. So if you painted along with me, I would absolutely love to see what it is that you pulled together, or if this is something where you're doing it after the fact and you want to share it. You can always share your WizKids painted miniatures with hashtags WizKids Miniatures, or you can do hashtag WK Paint Night. That's another hashtag that's been great for sharing your minis. You can also get in there and you can share with press@wizkids.com as a fan entry, and you might actually have that shared on our socials. So yes, this is our little buddy, our little Flump. This actually gives you a sense of scale next to me. And I am so glad you got to join me for this. This was Will you focus on this one? Probably not. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, if you have any interest in those fantastic Magic the Gathering products that I showed in the beginning of this episode, by all means, check out the description down below and it'll show you all there is to see in terms of where to order, their SKU numbers, and all of that goodness. Remember, reach out to your friendly local game store, see if they have any of these products on hand, and get your orders placed today with them. If friendly local game store is not an option, then by all means, please do shop online at shop.wizkids.com. That is it for today. I am Vee Mus'e. I very much enjoyed spending my time with you today. And make sure you join me next week for some more mini mayhem where I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to share with you, but I'm going into the warehouse on Friday. So I'll see what kind of goodies I can find. Fingers crossed there might be some blind boosters involved, because I know you all enjoyed very much so the surprise of what was in the box. That being said, I will see you on the flip side, everyone. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and until then, bye!